I sort of disagree a little bit. I thought they did a little bit better than warranting just a B, but I want to hear your perspective on it. Naturally, I think based upon your write-up and analysis, it's in large part because they traded up for Jaxson Dart, which was viewed as a desperate move to try to save their jobs, as you write. I felt like if you're going to go after a quarterback and you need to make a move like that, it's worth those resources to do, considering the quarterbacks that they've been working with over the last several years. And the fact that, like, if they went and picked Jaxson Dart at number 3, we would be killing them for that, having passed over Abdul Carter and a lot of other players. So I felt like they got out of the first round not in bad shape. And then the rest of their picks, pretty solid value based upon the board, especially Cam Scadaboo, Darius Alexander. And then talk to me about Marcus Mbao, the offensive guard they drafted in the 5th round. He's viewed by the model as one of the very best in terms of overall value of this entire draft class. But I have them as the 3rd best value draft class in the first 5 rounds and the 5th best overall. Talk to us about the Giants draft class.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I like a lot of their picks, which is why I still gave them a B despite the Jaxson Dart pick. Obviously, everybody loves Abdul Carter. He's going to be a stud. They now have a very deep pass rush unit. Darius Alexander is going to contribute to that. He probably plays a little bit on the interior defensive line, but he's also capable of lining up. Maybe on early downs, you could play him on the edge as well. Cam Scadaboo is going to be fun. He's probably going to be a little bit less of a pass-catching weapon as he was at Arizona State, because obviously you've got Tyrone Tracy there, who's literally a former wide receiver who's very capable of playing that role. And then Marcus Mbao, like you said, he slid a little bit further. I have not seen a good explanation for why he fell. He was a potential 3rd-round pick. He played offense, played right tackle mostly in college. He's got the ability to play guard as well. That versatility is certainly bodes well for him, at least carving out a spot. When someone like that falls a little bit further and we don't necessarily hear an explanation, oftentimes it's an injury. That could be the explanation for it. I'm just guessing, though, because there really hasn't it's been hard to connect the dots there as to why he stayed on the board. The reason why I can't go all the way and like give them a higher grade, though, is Jaxson Dart. I will say on the positive side, you're right. They didn't draft him in the top 10, which we see teams sometimes get desperate enough to take that type of player in the top 10. The Giants, in fact, did it with Daniel Jones. They also didn't give up a ton. Like, it was a pretty reasonable trade. Fortunately, they had that pick at the early 2nd round that they were able to move up with and avoid giving up a future 1st-round pick. So that's a positive as well. But ultimately, you drafted Jaxson Dart, who's very unlikely to be the long-term answer. And the biggest issue I have with that and why it feels a little bit desperate is you're going to be bad next year. The Giants are not going to compete for a Super Bowl. Maybe they finish in the middle of the pack. Maybe they knock on the door of the playoffs, depending on how things play out with Russell Wilson. Maybe he's serviceable enough to get them to like 8-9 wins, but you're not going to be good. Why not just enter next year still needing a quarterback? And it should be a good draft class for quarterbacks. There's at least 3 guys right now in next year's draft class that look like they're trending towards being solid prospects. And then there's other developmental guys who, maybe they take the leap in this year. Lenora Sellers from South Carolina is one of the guys I'm referring to that people are excited about. There's enough talent in next year's class that you don't need the number 1 pick to get a quarterback next year. So I would have just kicked that down the road, because you've already solved it, the quarterback situation in the short term. You don't need Jaxson Dart to come in right away, but because he's not going to play right away, it's going to be impossible to justify taking quarterback. What if they get the 5th pick in next year's draft and someone like Cade Klubnik is there, worthy of a top 10 pick? Are you going to take him? You're not, because you won't have seen enough of Jaxson Dart to be able to make that choice. So that is why I downgraded their draft a lot, even though there are quite a few players that I mentioned I like from this class.
Some very valid points there. And to me, that just screams ownership needs to have more of a voice in some of what is going on here. If ownership was a little bit stronger in their voice, I'm talking about Mara into Brian Daboll, this team probably loses week 17 and is drafting Cam Ward. Now, you don't have as high of opinion of Cam Ward as maybe some other people do. So not a big loss to them to get Abdul Carter and then, like you said, kick the can down the road. But if they maybe gave, hey, we'll give you 2 years to Daboll and Joe Shane, and that's the deal or agreement going into this, then they might have drafted a little bit differently. So I don't really know what's going on there with that front office, but coaches and GMs come and go. at the end of the day, ownership is who stands to gain the most if a team does really well, win Super Bowls. And I feel like that ownership has been relatively weak the last several years. Could have been a lot more authoritative or have a larger voice in deciding the direction of his franchise. He hasn't done that. And this is why the New York Giants are where they are.